So it's a delight to be here. Thank you. I am coming to you from Darwin, Charles Darwin University. And this is our group, Top End Language Lab. And we're always looking for more to join us. And we had a French student with us, Eric Leferrand from Grenoble for 3 years. And also Maya Ponsonnet from dédiée in Lyon 2 sometimes is visiting us. This work takes place in the context of Indigenous communities in the far north of Australia. Oh. Okay, you have video now. And where I am taught by this man, Dini Barbuk, who's an elder and senior lawman and leader in an Indigenous ranger program responsible for land management and conservation. So across Australia, there are Indigenous rangers. These are local people working to maintain their country. To them, uninhabited land is not pristine wilderness, it is wasteland and needs to be tended by people, which is their role. For myself, I'm Australian born, descended from English and German settlers. And for 30 years, I've lived and worked with Indigenous groups and been schooled in their life ways, starting in West Africa in the 1990s and later Amazonia and Melanesia. Since 2015, I've been working with this community in Arnhem Land and learning to speak the local language, Kunwingu. I'm still learning the basics and rely on the generosity and kindness of local people to put up with all of my mistakes. They're very gracious and they're so pleasantly surprised when someone learns to speak their language. And I realize how unusual that is. And it's something about the magic of language to speak straight to the heart. When you try even badly, people are blown away and they want to teach you. I feel like there's a deep hunger for respect, which does not exist in this colonial space. Today, I want to talk about language technology from this place. We often talk about language technology from no particular place, from nowhere, but really it's from the Western mainstream place. We assume a universal context, but it's not universal. My position as a newcomer in this community is curiosity about their lives and how they keep their language strong, rather than sharing my expertise to help them keep their language strong. It took me several years to get to this position, and I discovered it's through AI, or appreciative inquiry. This is not looking at the gaps and solving them with technology. This is looking at the strengths and asking, what do people want to do here? It's kind of simple. It's what you would do respectfully in any other community situation, after all. And strangely, I found that in such places I can learn lessons which seem to apply elsewhere. You'll be able to decide for yourself if that's the case for the languages where you work. And I think it's just because places like this force you to take orality seriously. So in thinking about where we are today, I've been coming up with some persistent problems. And I only started to reflect on these yesterday on the train from Paris. 4 things that bother me. The choice of large language models today was accidental. It was never planned. Imagine train lines going to places because that's where the builders of train lines want to go. It really is that stupid. We have a bunch of tech bros isolated from linguistic diversity imposing solutions on us. Yes, we clicked through an agreement which gave our data for any purpose, but this was not prior informed consent. How could it be when the inventors themselves didn't anticipate the dawn of the era of large language models? There is no informed consent here. That's a problem. Moreover, in terms of purpose, technology is presented as a service, but this is purely just disingenuous because there is an ulterior motive of harvesting data and selling our attention. This bothers me. Agency. Data is captured from people for purposes they could not possibly have agreed to, as I just mentioned. Then technologies are made based on unsupported beliefs about what people need locally. There is no sense of communicative intent, as Emily has also pointed out. This is actually absent. I was recently at EACL Malta, and when I saw people talking about context, they meant textual context, not real-world context. Real-world context must surely include why someone is speaking in the first place, their purpose. And we have the strange temerity to present NLP AI for social good and openness of data as some kind of emancipation. It's like the famous saying, information wants to be free. So we are liberal-minded people setting it free. Two more complaints. I'm sorry, it's early afternoon and you're having to listen to the complaints of an old white man. It's really the worst. Epistemology. Epistemology of language in particular. In our community, ATALA, NLP, it's generally monolingual text in documents. If it's a discourse type, it's narrative. It's in an institutional language with a standard orthography. The impulse of NLP is towards writing. In this particular research community, if you talk about language, you mean written language. So NLP, that's what it means. It defaults to text. If you're working with speech, that's the marked case, and you have to say spoken language processing. This is a place where no one will criticize you if your language processing system cannot handle intonation or prosody, because those are speech phenomena. They're not really there when we look at proper language, i.e. text. Treating non-standardized language is presented as a problem. We get dialect variation, which is an issue to be solved by normalization or something. We'd like to ideally like to level dialect differences, and we've lost sight of spoken dialogue, which may be in a local dialect. So we've got this epistemology of language technology as well, of universal solutions based on a view from nowhere. I get the sense technology is taking over our lives. When I look at the way children are glued to their devices, on myself too, I ask, would we choose this? And I see this in remote Indigenous communities, where children choose not to participate in the local life world, preferring to play games on their, or watch movies on their mobile devices. Why then would we take it to the ends of the earth in a kind of missionary endeavor? When Google has this program of the next 1,000 languages, it's linked to another program of the next billion users. Let's not forget that. So we can treat these kind of problems as just issues for the current paradigm that we would ideally deal with later. That's the standard mode of problems for paradigms, is we push certain non-problems to the edge rather than deal with them. We need to deal with the main things, take care of them first. But in a paradigm shifting moment, we can put together all of these things that don't fit, all of these things that are a problem for the current way of thinking about language as information processing, and ask what they say to each other, and ask, is there a different paradigm possible for us? And I believe there is. This matters. So the current situation is problematic. We have this stale metaphor that human minds are information processors. It's so convenient for us and self-serving that we can model them with computers. It's so convenient that human-human interaction can be replaced with human-machine interaction. This too is self-serving. We have a problem with the facts, namely, what is language? How convenient that language is whatever we can represent textually in a standard orthography. How convenient that the world is full of monolinguals who need information that we can supply through indexing the web and translating it all. Note the irony. And what about the values of efficiency and scalability? How convenient linguistic barriers can be solved with technology. How convenient that complex social problems like language shift and language loss can be solved with technology. So this speaks to a profound dissatisfaction, as you can guess. So these are the three signs I just gave that we're in the wrong paradigm for what we're trying to do. So where on earth do we begin? Locally, in the place where I've been writing, the purpose, the agency, the epistemology, technology are all very different. And I'm going to go through these in turn and then ask, what could they say to us? And I'll be very interested to sense what you make of this. So this is the space where I am in the far north of Australia, in a remote community with 60 people. I've been working there off and on since 2017, and I've had 18 months living in this community in a tent. I'm learning to speak this polysynthetic language, but I use a mixed language. I speak English with these words and constructions put in when I can, and people are very gracious and help me. And I'm getting better slowly. So let's think about purpose. There are local purposes here. People have their agency, and not surprisingly, a key one is about cultural survival. People want to transmit their life world to their children. There's ancestral knowledge about food, about ceremony, about making art, about hunting, all this life world. And people naturally want to use technology in service of this. They haven't cut themselves off from the outside world. They're just selective. It's an interesting lesson in choosing what to embrace from the outside rather than just clicking through all the agreements and putting up with all of the consequences down the stream. So I should mention, the top left photo, this is a man doing traditional burning. This is to happens in the cold time of year where they burn the grass, and it prevents wildfires from getting into the canopies of trees later in the hot season, where they can really destroy large amounts of the country. Top right, people are managing rock art, 30,000 rock art sites. Bottom left, children are learning a song and a dance and being taught by my co-author. So there's a zoomed in photo of him on the bottom right. This seems very, very particular, but I want to point out that this is kind of the same around the world. So in this top space, we have the institutional languages which have standardized orthographies. They have education systems. They have bodies of published literature. They have academies, etc. And they colonized the world very much. Then you've got another 5,000 plus oral languages, which are still being transmitted to children as a first language. These are places of primary orality. People don't look things up in this language. If you want to find something out, you talk to an elder and you hear a story. There's various stages of language shift here. So in level 5, there's some vernacular literacy, but in level 7, some children are actually switching to another language. And down here are languages which are moribund. There's a predictable path to extinction unless something is done about it. Crucially, this middle area is characterized by diglossia. So these are speech communities that speak multiple languages, and in their linguistic repertoire, languages are functionally differentiated for their purpose. Minimally, a so-called high variety, which is used for communicating with the outside world, and a so-called low variety, which is used for communicating locally. The same is true in European countries with the standardized language and local regional dialects. And it is just as strange there in these places as here to say to somebody locally, let's write your variety of spoken language so that you can access information. And they say, what are you even talking about? I use another language for accessing information. That's what diglossia is about. So these people have been on the receiving end of colonization for a couple hundred years. They have access to English. They mightn't be fluent, but everybody knows someone who is. So in the language graph or the social graph, people have one hop to somebody who is quite functional in English and can access any information they need in English. So the agenda of the next 1,000 languages, which necessarily encroaches on this space, because you can't do more than 500 languages without going into the oral language space. It's projecting functions of major written standardized languages onto languages which are not written. I find this strange because in any other area of technology design, you pay attention to your users and what they would want to do. But no, here we know, probably because we are monolinguals. I'm not speaking to this audience, but I'm talking about the tech bros in Silicon Valley who are designing a lot of this stuff. They are monolinguals and they assume if someone else speaks another language, that's a problem for translatability, and we need to provide technology to solve the problem. But actually, there's multiple spaces for technology. On the right is the Multilingual Information Society, with its bounded languages represented by circles with borders, and translation between all of them, represented by lines. On the left is culture areas. There's about 100 around the world, anthropologists identified. This is where there's multiple languages blending into each other, and where because of shared geography and history, there are many common cultural practices. And where you get high translatability, in other words, the lexicalization of cultural concepts is quite these culture areas. And so translatability is easy. In the middle is intercultural communication, when people want to participate in this overlapping area. All culture areas intersect this global information society. On the left, the primary agenda, I believe, is intergenerational knowledge transmission, because this is the key to cultural survival. Otherwise, you might as well have assimilated. Hopefully that makes sense. So back on the local level, here I am in my second topic of agency. If we were to ask, let's start by extracting data, which is my practice. I tried to record people telling stories and they wouldn't participate. They wondered why I wanted to commodify this speech. Who was it for? Who was going to listen to it? Why did I want to freeze this particular performance of a story? The recording and taking away of speech made no sense. It's a sign of resilience that such communities pick and choose what they want from the outside world. In this place, they choose not to have a bridge that's been offered to them. So 5 months of the year, you cannot cross this crocodile-infested river because it's more than 2 meters deep. And so they're cut off from the outside world. They like that. It looks like I'm collecting data here, doesn't it? But it's not open data. we're making a video of the community for teaching new rangers the code of conduct. There's a bunch of concepts in the code of conduct about things like transparency. The land management company likes transparency. We have to talk about these and what they mean locally. We use language mixing. So when they speak to me, they speak Gundwingu with some English thrown in, and I speak English with some Gundwingu thrown in, and we converge. What you can see here, perhaps, is that our work together begins with relationships. And this isn't just ethical, but required. So for instance, in Australia, Indigenous research has to meet these requirements for self-determination, leadership, reciprocal benefits, and sustainability. It's not a polite option to be ethical in terms of these criteria. It's required, and this isn't unique. Various other countries, like Canada, for instance, has this thing called OCAP, ownership, control, access, and possession. In the mainstream, though, our focus is on data-oriented principles. We present open data as if that is an unalloyed ethical good. Most recently is the care principles. So it's hard to think about how to do the normal kinds of AI in Indigenous communities with these principles. So how do you work together? I find this is a particular good way into agency, which recognizes distinct but compatible agendas. This is a place where typical understanding of theory of mind is slightly problematic because the people in the society we're relating to maybe have very different beliefs, desires, and intentions from us. But sometimes we can create a sweet spot. Here's a nice example for making a dictionary. So again, on the left, the brown oval represents a local life world, which is not accessible to me. There are concepts and words and practices and ceremonies that I don't get to participate in. Equally, on the right-hand side, there are practices which you and I would be familiar with, curating lexical data, making sure it's consistent with our transcriptions, maybe doing some morphological analysis. All this stuff has pretty much zero interest for local people. They don't mind me doing it if it means I learn the language though. So in the middle, we could do a white kind of activity, which you see depicted in the photo at the bottom right, of me transcribing, and I'm pointing to some words on the screen and asking Dean to help me transcribe what we're listening to. On the left, though, he's explaining a concept, and it's about the epistemology of fire. And it's a very big story for him. So there's certain words that come up in the transcription which need a lot of translation, sometimes called thick translation. Our work together is mutually empowering. In other words, it's like gears going together. So the funding that I have that is to maybe generate a product like a dictionary, eliciting words and curating them, actually means that I can be in the community and paying people who decide what they want to talk about these words and sentences. And sometimes they say, well, actually, I need to take you to this place and I'll tell you the story about that word. Or I need to go off and ask someone else to get clear about what this means. And that happens out of sight. And that's okay. This does risk being extractive, but actually the extraction of the dictionary is something that people can approve. It's just that this promise of something in 5 or 10 years' time is not motivating daily participation. But me providing employment and food, and then people going away and talking to the elders about what the words mean, this is highly respectful and everybody. Thirdly, the epistemology. What is language here and what does it do? This is one of our blind spots because we are used to thinking of language as a bounded code. We put lines on maps to indicate where one language ends and another one begins. It's a bounded denotational code. It's a bounded lexico-grammatical code. If you and I talk about learning language, we probably mean learning the lexicon and learning the grammar. Locally, it's different. And it's hard to see. Sometimes people say things like, if I lose my language, I will not know who I am. And as linguists, I used to love this. I thought, fantastic, I can help you learn the grammar of your language. I've got a published grammar from 10 years ago. Let's go. But an important clue is the local word which gets translated into English as language, which more idiomatically translated means utterance. In other words, a moment of a speech act, or not a speech act, but a speech event. And it means story, which is the content. So if I forget my language, that's about just as much really about forgetting the stories and the speech. This is a different epistemology of language. Language is situated. So in this picture, this man, Gamarang, he's teaching me about the country with the help of the rock art. Suppose I recorded his speech in order to convert it to static written form and take it away to dissect into morphemes and then feed into a machine. This would not take seriously his communicative intent. However, he's happy for me to record it for the purpose of my own learning. So it's not about the recording, it's about the intent. As another clue on this, let's look at translation. Yes, we can translate I work into je travaille or ich arbeite or ngaduk miri. But in the last case, we lose the whole cosmos in translation. That's not just a nuance. So in Arnhem Land, when we talk about working, we mean ceremonial work. This word, ngaduk miri, literally means to pull and stand. It's about clearing a ceremony ground, typically for a funeral. This is the archetypal cultural activity, funerals. You don't work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. This is bizarre. You work when ceremony and cultural needs call for it. That's like maximal agency. And they find it strange that I would go to work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, just because I signed up for it. Here's another example on a book on fieldwork. I'll let you read Ian Madison's words. Now, this is from 20 years ago. I don't fault Ian. I want to observe local people's attachment to the content. And why wouldn't they be? Imagine somebody taking notes from what I'm saying today, being so attached to getting it right that they come down afterwards and check with me a phonetic detail of something that I said. Was that voiced or unvoiced? That'd be bizarre because I'm trying to connect with you on the content. I don't see my speech as particularly important aside from the content. It's a means to an end. And so if somebody ancestrally is using that language and telling me a story, I had a man say to me this once. He said, I'm telling you a story about my father who died. I was asking him about voicing in an obstrument. That really shook me. I realized there's something wrong with my position here. Linguists attach so much to forms because this is what is most accessible. Just imagine wanting to access the meaning. That takes years, doesn't it? And whole knowledge of that life, world, and society. You don't have that long. The requirement is to get in, get data, get out, get published. And that requirement gets in the way of treating language as local people do. Gosh, I've got to go faster. Third thing that, hang on, that should be the fourth thing. Thank you. I can't count. What do people want to do with technology? We know that parents don't like it when their kids are addicted to their devices, but they don't feel powerful to stop it. This is a society where you don't force children. It's clearly not what people want from the technology. So here's a woman using technology. What she did was quite insightful. So I went into the community to do a writing workshop. I had an idea that could have come from my 4th grade primary school. You were going to record a story and transcribe it into your notebook. This is only like 2 years ago, so it's like I'm still learning. But what people did was insightful. Instead of transcription, they did inscription. Inscription is writing down just enough so that you can reconstruct what happened. If anyone's taking notes during a lecture, it's typically inscription. It's particular to what you need. There may be content that you already knew, and so you didn't bother writing it. What they did was inscription. They took enough notes from the story so they could perform it well, because guess what? They want to tell the stories to the children. They want to get the story straight. It's all about intergenerational knowledge transmission again. Guess how they used me? So I was going to be there in a teacher role, teaching word attack skills and all those things that we remember fondly. It was my comfortable space. What they did is they pivoted to a place of their agency in which I became a tool. I became a piece of the technology. So there's recording devices. There's this giant flip charts that you maybe just see in the bottom right picture. And occasionally someone would ask how to write a certain word, and we would sound it out together, and I would put it on the flip chart. And we had a flip chart page of nouns, one of verbs, one of place names, one of skin names, various things like that. And I realized what I was doing was something that could be implemented. What we did is somebody would say a word like aduk miri, and then would say, well, what's that first syllable? Nga, right? What's that start with? Ng. If they got it wrong, we would say it however they said. Like sometimes they thought it was an ny, nya. And I'd say nyaduk miri, and they said, no, nga. And so syllable by syllable, we would break it down. And so I was like a speech recognizer working at the syllable level. That gave me an idea for an app. But look how the menial place they gave me, projecting their agenda into the space. It's just wonderful. So I want to do a slightly more detailed example, then I'll stop. So when I first arrived in the community, this is my agenda. This is in 2016. Let me record your language and help you keep your language strong. This is like colonial moments, gospel arriving. People resisted. They didn't want me to take it away, like I said. Local language is utterance performed in a place by a person for a purpose. It makes zero sense to take it away. They pivoted to a place of agency and taught me about their society, such as in kinship. My second take was that I could teach you about your language and about technology, because I'm still in love with this first year moment I had of learning about valency and verbs and verb classes. And I just thought, once you see this, lights come on and you become a grammarian. But no, it doesn't work. Instead, people invited me to participate in the Ranger program with their school and with knowledge transmission activities. I learned good ways to work together. Lastly, I just opened myself up to what local people wanted to do. And they taught me how to read the kinship, the seasons, the country. And so, for example, I designed this data collection activity. So around this community, I asked people to show me around. I asked at least a dozen. And then I went on the same path and stopped at the same places, the same 20 places each time. And then I just asked people to tell me, what's this? So here's some of the places we visited. So there's the school, open air school on the top left where I was teaching. Number 5, some trees. I was trying to learn them, so on. There's the spring on the top left where we bathed. There's my camp, visitor camp, bottom right. Various other places. So in the utterances people produced in each place, these things came up. Mang, to get, manbun, to make, jamais, to say. And on the right, the 3rd and 4th item, gabiri. This came up often. So here's some examples. And I've got the audio for this to share with you. So look, listen out for these content words in green. The topical words about the pandanus tree and weaving. So you see on the bottom, we have yaknara, which means pandanus, gobakoban, ancestors, galba, which is this yellow ochre, and what's that? I don't remember that word. Ngobarn, gungobarn, the pandanus leaf. Just listen to a few of these.
Nane yakarano gabiribitman gabirman bon teman gaime yakara galba teman gaime galulme yakarano har karime khala banyak karime yakara galba yakara mulme
Mane banyak ngara dari banyak kara mane gada lo kabir ngoban man kabir man bun kabir ginge bo kabir man bun no plastik no ngimangai me pues talo betre abru beli
mane ba umaban obo banyak umaban man kabir man bon basket kabir umaban yirme ay kabiran marap.
You see the same forms keep coming up. I didn't translate this. I only transcribed it in order to talk about it. What I did is I went to each place and to what everybody said about it. And certain words kept coming up, and I learned those words. This is a corpus. It's not distributed. I don't have permission, but the point is there's no value in taking it away. The content only makes sense here in this place for this purpose of language learning, which is what local people wanted. We could add all sorts of AI to this. For example, to track my learning, to order this content in terms of difficulty, maybe to elicit more focused content on something I haven't learnt yet. Coordinating it between users, I'm guessing what words mean. All sorts of things could be added. It's basically embodied language learning without requiring the writing. It's a bit different to the default model, which we're familiar with here, centering the machine and what we can do with human labor. It's this model of where 2 humans are interacting and the machine is capturing something to feed to one of the humans to make them do better. This is a useful design pattern. In other words, I'm trying to give a substantive, useful way to proceed in such places without commodifying the data. There's something else going on here. It's an epistemological shift. This is our old languages data, but this is our languages social practice. We don't need to do everything. This idea of simulating humans with a machine to the nth degree, where did this come from? It came from some desire to play God or something, but it's not necessary in order to do useful language technology. You could look down on this as assistive language technology, but I would look up at anything which takes local agency and self-determination seriously and seeks to elevate the value and quality of human lives. There's no writing here. And we see this as the original and most prevalent use of language, as distinct from a situation in the NLP community. We can even stop focusing on language from this position. So, for example, we can ask, what's happening with the children? So here's a student of mine with a PhD project on technology of playing cards and how they activate local authorities in transmitting ecological knowledge to children. We can ask what's happening with the weather. Here's another student. And we're talking about climate communication. We can even ask something much more basic. What's happening with the prestige of the language? How do we adapt to the fact that linguistic diversity is okay? We don't have to have a prestige hierarchy. So here we have a format of storytelling which promotes linguistic diversity in our towns and cities, where storytellers take to the stage, share their language as verbal art to people that they know, people in the same community who pay to listen to them share their stories. There was one in Perpignan last weekend. So to summarize, here's the story in a single slide. When we center the speech community, we take seriously the diglossia between a local oral vernacular and an external institutional language. Then we can think about the external functions and do all the same ASR and MT for 500 languages. We don't need to go to the next 1,000. And this is where we find the epistemology of languages data and the human in the loop design pattern. But when it comes to the local life world, the target for language technologies is oral vernaculars and their function in supporting transmission of life crucial knowledge, including social structures, caring for the land and working with people who come from outside. And this is where we find the epistemology of languages, a situated, embodied social practice and a really marvelous opportunity for the machine in the loop design pattern. What about you? Can you think of ways that language technology can be designed to support local agency and self-determination amongst minoritized communities? These are existential matters. So when I talked about purpose, this gets to the teleological point made by Ananias. This is about cultural survival. When we talk about agency, we talk about resisting a new colonial project of mining, of extracting value and devaluing human agency in society. Epistemologically, we shift from treating language as data, which is creating the meaning crisis in our world, and seeing language as an integral part of culture, society, and country. And in technology, we resist this headlong rush to build machines, undermining the quality of human life, when technology is merely a tool. It can't be more than a tool, as it lacks the communicative intent, as Emily pointed out. So we need a new paradigm. Language as data is dangerous. We need language as embodied communication. We can design technology that works like this. It's just not extractive. And this technology can be affirming of linguistic diversity, of life in multiple, very diverse places, and can amplify human agency and enhance human connection. That's all I have. Thank you.